Namaste and greetings. I, Shweta Shankar, researcher at IMPRI, Impact and Policy Research Institute, Prabhav Evam Niti Anusandhan Sansthan, Nai Delhi, extend my warmest welcome to you all to IMPRI #Web Policy Learning. Today, we are gathered here for Day 8 of Law and Public Policy Youth Fellowship, an online national summer school program, a 2-month online immersive legal awareness and action research certificate training course, and internship program. This program is organized by the IMPRI, Impact and Policy Research Institute, New Delhi. The chair for the program is Professor Vibhuti Patel, visiting distinguished professor at IMPRI, and the fellowship lead advisor and the expert legal hands-on session is Advocate Dr. Shalu Nigam, visiting senior fellow, IMPRI. The distinguished experts include Sri Sandeep Chachra, Professor Vibhuti Patel, Advocate Dr. Shalu Nigam, Advocate Dr. Vahida Nayanar, Professor Mukul Ashar, Professor Uday Shankar, Sri Udit Mishra, Dr. Nivedita P. Haran, Sri Bhartendra Singh Baswan, Dr. Punima Chauhan, Advocate Dr. Albertina Almeida, Dr. Gladstone Xavier, Professor Aruna Roy, Advocate Audrey D. Mello, Dr. Kaustubh Bandyopadhyay, Advocate Munalini Deshmukh, Professor Sharmila Ghuge, Advocate Flavia Agnes, Dr. Rashmi Singh, Mr. Debaditya Sinha, Professor Swaran Singh, Advocate Lara Jasani, Professor Anil K. Gupta, Justice Ajit K. Singh, Mr. Himanshu Shekhar, Dr. Amar Jasani, Dr. Soumyadip Chattopadhyay, Mr. Bilal Khan, Sri Rajiv Ranjan Singh, Sri Tikendra Singh Panwar, Sri Shailesh Gandhi, Dr. Simi Mehta, Advocate Abdul Hafiz Gandhi, Professor Amita Singh, Dr. Ajay Gudavarti, Sri Amit Dubey, Professor Sangamitra Acharya, Dr. Y. Suresh Reddy, Advocate Sanchita Ann, Sri Surendranath Pathi. The conveners for this course are Dr. Simi Mehta, CEO and Editorial Director at IMPRI, Advocate Dr. Shalu Nigam, Visiting Senior Fellow IMPRI, and Dr. Arjun Kumar, Director at IMPRI. I welcome you all to this enlightening deliberation and thank you for putting your time, effort, and energy into truly understanding the vital role and complex intricacies of legal and public policy frameworks. We have also shared the course outline and reading resources material in your email for your kind perusal. We will be providing videos of each session for flexible learning at your place and pace. Before we start today's session, I would like to announce the housekeeping rules. It is imperative that you join the meeting on time. There will be a Q&A session after each presentation. Share your questions in the Q&A box and not in the chat box. The questions must not be posted as an anonymous attendee. Ensure that your questions are precise. Refrain from making general comments in the questions to save time. Our session for Day 8 will cover topics of Navigating Criminal Justice by Advocate Dr. Shalu Nigam, Peace, Conflict, and Social Work by Dr. Gladstone Xavier. To start the session, I would like to invite Professor Vibhuti Patel for her opening chair remarks. Ma'am, over to you.
Thank you, Ms. Shweta Shankar. Thank you, Dr. Arjun Singh, Dr. Simi Mehta, Dr. Shalu Nigam, Ms. Vidhita, and Satyam Tripathi ji. Welcome, Dr. Gladstone Xaviers and esteemed participants. The third week and the 7th session of this online National Summer School program. We are meeting on the day of Eid, so Eid Mubarak. Just a brief summary and outline that we began on day 1 with the ideological framework of public policy and laws. In day 2, we deliberated on the international instruments that we have for human rights laws, application, and impact and its relevance. Day 3 focused on economic development and public policy and law by Professor Mukul Ashar. And we also had on the 4th session, 4th day, we discussed the question of relationship of executive and judiciary and the two schools of thoughts which were opposed to each other's viewpoint, that is should judiciary should meddle with the executive or not. Then we also had a session on law, public policy, and media, in which the question how media had impacted policy reforms and the legal reforms that was discussed, models of media houses which were discussed, then how people should have stake in the media house, not the billionaire. So that was being discussed. Day 5 was on public interest litigation, where Dr. Shalu Nigam gave us a glorious history of judicial activism, which took up some of the very, very important concerns of housing rights and for gender issues and for forest rights and for people rights of the minorities. Day 6, that means previous day, was where the day 6 was Bhartendra Singh Baswanji. He spoke on the question of the policy making process and who are the drivers of policy making. And then we had a 7th day that was about the Purnima Chauhanji. She spoke on reflections of urban governance practices, and she provided the reality check on relationship of administration and governance, climate change, demographic dividend, urban development and governance. And she also gave many examples of say Malmö Municipal Corporation in Sweden. She also spoke about the policies in countries like Ireland, Iceland, and also her own state, Himachal Pradesh, how they created evidence-based policy intervention and tried to change the reality by people's participation. She gave examples of the Rajiv Gandhi Awas Yojana and also how they address the question of declining extremely adverse child sex ratio by going through the robust data and also coming up with their own alternatives. Dr. Albertina, she spoke on inclusion laws and policy, where she gave a detailed understanding of the reservation policy and its implication. She also gave a very poignant profile of institutional murder of Dr. Patel Tadvi in the discussion, even the discussion, suicide by Rohit Vemula, and currently also by the IIT student were discussed. And she also said that what we need is very necessary to have a legal quotas for representation of underrepresented groups, both in public and private sector, and reservation has to be proportionate to population. The last speaker in the previous day, 7th day, was Dr. Shalu Nigam. She spoke on freedom of expression and said that we have difference of opinion that can be discussed, but we can't use torture and other repressive methods. She also gave an example of how farmers struggle against the three draconian laws. They also signified the people's participation, and the answer is a public debate and discourse. We need to have public inquiry system. And she also gave a homework to the participants to speak on death penalty, a capital punishment, and what kind of corrective measures we need to improve our society. And she ended with Tagore's famous poem, "Where the mind is without fear, held is held high." And that was a very optimistic way in which she inspired the participants. And today we have two presentations. Dr. Shalu Nigam will speak on legal hand-on session based on her personal legal experience as a legal activist, and also Dr. Gladstone Xavier, who will speak on peace, conflict, and social work. Thank you.
Thank you, ma'am. Now we have the session by Advocate Dr. Shalu Nigam, who will be taking up the topic navigating criminal justice. Advocate Dr. Shalu Nigam is a visiting senior fellow at IMPRI, advocate, author, and researcher, gender and human rights. Welcome, ma'am, and over to you.
Good morning, and morning to all of you. And today's session, I'd like to start about, because last session we end up with death penalty, but what exactly is the criminal justice system? So this is the part 1 of where we will talk about criminal justice system and what are the technicalities, a bit of the basics of that. We'll look into this session. Yeah, so I'll start with 2 cases. The one is about, there was a chemical engineer who has been found guilty of murdering his 20-year-old wife, Manjushri. She was suffocated and she was administered potassium cyanide, and both the Session Court and the Bombay High Court found him guilty. But the Supreme Court acquitted this man because what they focus on is a written diary by Manjushri, where and also the oral statement she made to her parents and sisters and friends about the ill treatment meted to her by her husband and his friend. So the judgment reads, Manjushri appears not only to be a highly sensitive woman who expected wholehearted love from her husband, but having been thoroughly disappointed, she may have chosen to end her life. A hard fact of her life, which cannot be denied, is that some people, in view of their occupation or profession, find little time to devote to their family. And speaking in lighter vein, lawyers, professors, doctors, and perhaps judges fall within this category. And to them, Manjushri case should be an eye-opener. Now, the whole evidence of violence and betrayal by husband, all those were ignored by the Supreme Court judge to construct the image of an overly sensitive woman who made unreasonable demands of undivided attention from her busy husband. And this case became a focal point for the feminist groups in Mumbai, who then led their protest, including a poster exhibition titled Make Manjushri. I am a Manjushri, and they also hold a signature campaign. Basically, the aim is to show that how victim blaming is being used, and then victim blaming cannot be, how can you the court can focus only on the victim character and not how can the guilt of the accused cannot be seen. Similarly, there are other cases where, again, the dowry death cases where the women were killed, and the evidence shows that there was insecticide poisoning, but then the Supreme Court opined that a demand for a money on account of financial expenses or bearing some urgent domestic expenses cannot be termed as demand for dowry, and therefore conviction of appellants cannot be sustained. So dowry violence and dowry death in this case is mitigated as domestic expenses by the court. And similarly, there are other cases. I can go on and on, how the hierarchy of courts from trial court to the apex court denied justice to women on technical grounds, while framing issues on something which I think, and many of the women's organization, the members may think that housing loan cannot be construed as demand for dowry, but women are being beaten and abused and mentally harassed for demanding money. So there is one poem which was written by the author called Geeta, and she was cited in his. And the poem reads, they say Sita the chaste emerged from the fire, radiant and beautiful, but there was a Sita I knew, chaste enough till yesterday. Full charred corpse today. This kerosene and matches test is something that Sitas of today invariably fail. So basically, the aim of criminal justice system is to punish the guilty and to protect the innocent. And it has the purpose is to ensure that every person who suffered an injury or loss at the hands of others is allowed to seek justice. So criminal justice system is expected to provide a maximum sense of security to the people and dealing with the crimes and criminals effectively, quickly, and legally. Purpose is to maintain peace and harmony in the society, and the aim is to reduce the level of criminality in the society by ensuring maximum, detection and conviction of reported crimes. So, and the aim is to punish the wrongdoers, prevent the reoccurrence of the crime, regulate the behavior and conduct of human beings, provide relief to the victim, and treatment of offenders and their rehabilitation. So basically, the purpose is to create deterrence. And we have various theories in law, if you see. So we have instrumental theories of justice, which look at the consequences of punishment for wrongdoing, and they raise certain questions such as, why should you punish, who should be punished, and what punishment should they receive? So there are scholars who are called as utilitarian theorists. They look forward to the future consequences of punishment and focus on deterrence, rehabilitation, and incapacitation. There are retributive theories who say that the person should be punished like eye for an eye kind of justice, or tooth for an tooth kind of justice, which is prevalent in some countries. But in India, again, we have constitution democracy, so we talk about restorative justice, which is an approach to justice that focuses on the needs of victims and offenders instead of more than on punishing the offenders. So the criminal justice system in India, was established during the British period, and Thomas Babington Macaulay, he was the one who framed the system. He is also one who framed our education system, and there are critics who says that the kind of education system which he framed for Indian masses is that it is about preparing the clerks to serve the British administration at that point of time, and basically it was not preparing the citizens to raise consciousness or to ask questions. So that is the kind of education system he gave, and even in the criminal justice system, he talked about the Victorian mentality he brought in. So and the patriarchal values which are ingrained in a legal system. So we have Indian Penal Code, which defines crime and prescribe punishment. This was adopted in 1860, and then we have Indian Evidence Act, which governs about the process of evidence. This was made in 1872. Then we have Code of Criminal Procedure, which was enacted in 1861, and this was amended in 1973. And it talks about the rules which are to be followed at every stage. Though after that, amendments were made in all these laws. A post Madras case, which we'll talk about later, in 1983, when 4 legal professors they wrote open letter to the Chief Justice of India in Tukaram, after the Supreme Court rendered decision in Tukaram versus State of Maharashtra. Then again, the laws were amended in the 80s, and we got Section 304B, that is pertaining to dowry debts, and Section 498A, which talks about cruelty to married women in their matrimonial homes. So in 2000, the Government of India formed a panel headed by Justice Malimath, and in 2003, Justice Malimath Committee report was submitted with 158 recommendations. Now, this committee opined that the existing system is in favor of accused and did not focus on justice to the victims of crime. In 2013, after the Nirbhaya rape case, we had Justice J.S. Verma committee, which suggested several reforms, and then we will talk about this more in part 2 of the presentation. But basically, this is the structure of the hierarchy of the courts. So at the lower level, you have judicial magistrates and or metropolitan magistrates. Then you have a chief judicial magistrate or chief metropolitan magistrate. Then you have assistant session judge, and above that you have district and session judge. Then you can appeal to High Court, and then finally you can go to Supreme Court. So there is a whole range level of different courts. So if there is a case, you have to start from the lower level and then you move up. And we follow the adversarial system of justice, where there are 2 parties. There is one prosecution advocate and there is a defense advocate. Prosecution advocate for the state. So we have, in criminal justice system, we have the cases, where the state is filing or prosecuting the accused. So it's state versus so and so. So we have a prosecution advocate, and the accused is represented by a defense advocate, and the judge decide the case on the basis of evidences produced and the arguments between the counsel, witnesses, and evidences. So it is the duty of the police to investigate the matter and to collect evidence, and the prosecutor represents the state, and he is obliged, that he argue in the favor of, the victim, because victim is called as a witness. Like she's not given, she's not the person who is, the center of the system. So accused is presumed to be innocent until proven guilty, and the prosecution has to prove this beyond a reasonable doubt. So the kind of offenses we have is cognizable offense, non-cognizable offense, bailable and non-bailable offense, and compoundable and non-compoundable offense, depending on the severity of the crime. So if there is a theft, simple theft, it could be seen as non-cognizable offense, where a police officer has no authority to arrest without the warrant. and the police has to take the permission from the court. These are the offenses such as mischief, public nuisance, and simple hurt. Cognizable offense, they are non-bailable offense generally, and they are very serious categories of offense, and they cannot be compounded. So the police has to take cognizance of the offense, and then they have to start the investigation. So these include serious offense such as rape, murder, theft, and police can arrest you without warrant. So how do the criminal justice system start in motion? First of all, a person has to file the offense, the incident happens, and somebody has to file the first information report. The first information report is a written document that is prepared by police when they receive information about the commission of the serious offense, cognizable offense. If the offense is non-serious, they can say, okay, no need to file, they can file a diary. So, so generally a complaint is lodged by the police to the victim. Victim can go to the police station and can lodge the report in orally or in writing. And this is a very important document. It sets the process in motion. So only after FIR is registered, police can investigate the case. And the police officer is supposed to give the copy of FIR to the complainant free of cost. What should be mentioned in the FIR? It should be the name and address of complainant, date, time, and location of the incident, the true facts of incident as they occurred, name and description of the person involved, witness if any. And generally you don't file a false complaint, because that again, that means you're misleading the police and you could be fined. So in cases where FIR is not registered, what can you do? Because generally what people ask is that, many a times police don't register FIR. So if the police is not, investigating a complaint, then you have to see if the case is, kind of a non-serious in nature, that is non-cognizable, and police can say, okay, there is no enough ground to investigate. So, but the police must record the reason for not conducting an investigation. And but still, if you see that your case is very serious and still the police is not, filing the FIR, so you can go and meet the SP, that is Superintendent of Police. You can meet the higher officers like Deputy Inspector General or Inspector General, and you can send them by writing or by post. And you can also file a private complaint before the court having jurisdiction. So, the complaint can also be made to State Human Rights Commission or the National Human Rights Commission if police does nothing to enforce the law. And with right now with that this digital thing coming up, you can also file EFIR or zero FIR. And now again, every state has different kind of rules. So, but if the police can say, okay, this is not under my jurisdiction. Another police station may say that, okay, this is not under my jurisdiction. So you can file zero FIR in that case, and that FIR will be transferred to the police station that has the jurisdiction for the investigation to begin. So after the FIR is lodged, the police will conduct investigations and they will file a charge sheet, and the prosecution will give evidence and witnesses, and then accused is given a chance to present his or her case, and the statement of accused is recorded. The defense lawyer will give the evidence, and both the lawyers, the prosecution and defense, will give their final arguments. And the last stage after the closing of final argument is judgment, where accused could be either acquitted or convicted. And if there is an accomplice, and that person should be treated same as accused, because generally they say, about meeting of minds or mens rea. Mens rea is about guilty mind and then guilty act. So, together that constitutes a crime. So what are the rights of complainant and survivors? So as per section 357A of CRPC, Criminal Procedure Code, a victim can get compensation. So Punjab and Haryana High Court hold that a minor rape victim cannot be denied compensation, even if it is not brought up at the end of trial. And then there are funds which have been created in 2013 after Justice J.S. Verma committee gave their report. Right to compensation is one of the right the complainant may have, and then the other law provision says that the trial should be conducted with full dignity. They should be speedy and with protection. And if there is a woman who is involved, no question could be asked by to the victim that assassinates her character. So there are various judgments which give the detailed guidelines about how to give the evidence, and how to question the victim and witnesses, and their identity should not be revealed, and their original identities should be kept confidential. And victim can also appeal against the bail granted to the accused. So if the victim feels that the court is unjustly giving bail to the accused, the victim can make an application. So we have a United Nations Declaration of Basic Principles of Justice for the Victim of Crime and Abuse of Power, and it provides for 4 major rights of victim to the crime, that is access to justice and fair treatment, restitution, compensation, and assistance. And the system also gives rights to the accused, so that the rights of accused are before the trial, during the trial, and after the trials, they should be protected. We have provisions, as we have already discussed, in Article 22 of the Constitution. So there are protection against arrest and detention, and the person has to be produced before the nearest magistrate within 24 hours of arrest. The person has right to fair trial. The person arrested has to be informed of the ground of the arrest and his right to bail. And again, Section 50 talks about obligation of police officer making the arrest to inform the arrest to a nominated person. So if I'm being arrested, they have the duty to arrest some of my relative or friend, so that the person could be called, and they can engage a lawyer or help me. So I have a protection against self-incrimination and double jeopardy, which can never be infringed upon. In case a woman is arrested, she can't be arrested before sunrise, or after during the night time she couldn't be arrested, and then a woman police officer should be there, and prior permission should be taken from first-class judicial magistrate. In several of the cases, the Supreme Court has held that the police officer making arrests are responsible, that females are segregated from men and kept in female-only section in the police station. If there is no separate lockups available, then women should be kept in separate room. The woman arrested has a right to obtain free legal aid. Hossaina Khadun versus State of Bihar, we have discussed this case earlier. So she must know the grounds of her arrest, and police officer executing the arrest should communicate the same to her. A woman arrested for an offense can be handcuffed only by female officer if it is absolutely necessary. A police officer is not allowed to detain an arrested person for more than 24 hours. In case a woman is arrested, the arrangement for her custody should be properly made. So also another provision says that women should not be called to the police station, and if the police has to question a woman, they can go to their place of residence, and they could talk to them in front of their friend or their relatives or their family. And it says that a male under age of 15 shall not be required to attend any place other than the place where they reside. And whenever a woman is being examined, the examination should be made under the supervision of female registered medical practitioner, and women should be guarded by female constables or police officers, and prenatal and postnatal care, in case it's required, it should be provided. And the pregnant woman should not be restrained, and her health and safety could not be compromised. So once a person is arrested, that person has a right to keep silence, and confession state or a statement made in court, the magistrate must determine that it is being done voluntarily, and it's not being somebody's being not compelled to speak in the court against the will. So right to remain silent is not recognized in any law, but it is based on constitutional provisions and the Evidence Act. embedded in the right to fair trial. And under Article 20, it says that a person, whether accused or not, cannot be compelled to be a witness against himself or herself. This is called principle of self-incrimination. In several court cases, the court has said that the general fundamental rights of protection is available to every accused person, and no person can be tortured or forcible extraction of statement cannot be made. The person has the right to remain silent during interrogation, and in case a doctor is examining the person, the person can say that he or she is being tortured in the custody, and then the medical practitioner has to make a note and present it before the magistrate without any delay. Again, the health and safety of an arrested person, this is the duty of a person, the policeman who is having the custody of the accused. And the notice of appearance of arrested person should be given prior. And in Anesh Kumar versus State of Bihar, this judgment is very famous. And in this case, the court has said that, before making the arrest, the police has to follow certain guidelines, and they have given guidelines about how to arrest a person and what are the rights of the arrested person. So in DK Basu, again, DK Basu versus State of West Bengal, we have discussed this judgment earlier, that if a police officer would be held in contempt of court, he would be subjected to departmental inquiry, and if he is not carrying out his duty correctly. So even for the witnesses, now we have system of right and protection, because generally what we see in many of the cases is that witnesses are being harassed by the the accused person, and many of the cases where the judges they say that we knew that this person has committed this crime, but the witnesses have turned hostile, or they are not talking, or they have refused to state the truth. So that's why we need a system to protect the right of witnesses. The British jurists, they have said that witnesses are the eyes and ears of justice. So without them, the justice cannot be done properly. So in Sahara Sheikh versus State of Gujarat in 2004, the courts have said that if witnesses are threatened or they are forced to give false evidence, that would not result in fair trial, and therefore it is essential to protect the witnesses from threats or coercion. So in several cases, the courts have given the guidelines to protect the witnesses, and the witness is a woman or a male under the age of 15 years. The special protection program should be there to protect them. A person cannot be compelled to give statement that incriminates them, and the witness shall be provide payment as per the rules by the police officer who called them during the investigation. And the Ministry of Home Affairs, they have come out with a witness protection scheme in 2018. And they say that the application should be given to the court, and a threat analysis report will be prepared by the ACP or the DSP, who is in charge of police subdivision. And depending upon the urgency of matter, the court can pass interim protection for the witnesses or their family members during the pendency of application. And all the hearings of witness protection application shall be held in camera. Held in camera meaning that no outside person is allowed to attend the hearing. So we also have vulnerable witnesses schemes. If it says that there is an inquiry into the trial of rape, that should be conducted in camera. Again, no person, outside person should hear that, should be present in the courtroom, and the court can say, okay, let us close the door, and solely the victim and the lawyers are there, and in-camera trial could be done, and generally it says that this should be done by a woman judge or magistrate, and even during the printing or publishing of the judgments, the rights of victims, shouldn't be there. And Supreme Court in Sakshi versus Union of India in 2004, they have talked about directions for holding trial of child's, child who is being sexually abused or raped. And they say that, the child shouldn't come in direct contact with the accused. So there should be a kind of arrangement of a screen or some kind of other arrangement, so that a child should not see the accused. And the questions which are put in cross-examination on behalf of the accused, they should be, properly framed, or the defense lawyer could talk to judge and judge could ask the question instead of, as we see that generally defense lawyers, they harass the victims of, the rape. And again, we have a critique of this system, and basically they say that the entire system is based on the assumption that that there is a reasonable man who is a basic unit. So, it is all about the system which is based on male dominance, which talks about controlling female sexuality and reproduction, and it is based on patriarchal presumption. And while dealing with the offense against women, the judge fall back to this yardstick, and many of the judgments are given with the patriarchal mindset, and so there is a need to make the system transparent and accountable for as we have seen in earlier two judgments, we about the dowry deaths. And also the system is ineffective and efficient, and there are delays, it's expensive, the conviction rate is low, and it has failed to deter the crimes. So there are the problems such as lack of staff and infrastructure, there's corruption, there is the personnel, the staff is not trained, they are not sensitive, and patriarchal mindset exists. So what the women's, the groups and the human rights groups, they have talking about is making the system more victim and survivors centered also, because the rights of victims, should be upheld. And generally the feminist critiques, they have said that, the system paid little attention to the crime victims. It ignored the sex differences in the processing. It disregarded the dynamics of gender and power, which comes into play when there are male offenders and then the victims are women. So there are certain questions which could be raised about this entire system and the way it is working, that the deterrence has remained ineffective. So how should we proceed? Then again, the incidence, like the conviction rate in the incidences of violence against women, it remains low consistently low over, if you see the data from National Crime Record Bureau, the conviction rates are low in specifically if you talk about rape cases, if you talk about dowry death cases, if you talk about violence against women, the domestic violence cases. So in that case, what should we do? The women's and human rights movement have recommended several reforms, like such as training to police personnel, improving the situation of jails, increasing the number of courts, and so on. But we have to measure that how far these are enforced. Then again, how much funds are being allocated to the improvement in terms of training and in terms of gender sensitization. So every time a serious incident takes place, we talk about raising, enhancing penalties. But how far, raising penalties have helped to deter the crime? We need to, look into all these questions. So I will end with these two quotes. Like, Wendy Brown, she said that, we have to talk not about regulation, but more about sharing of power, freedom. We have to talk about freedom, not protection, and we have to talk about affirmation of democracy, which may end marginalization of women. Nancy Fraser, another, active academician, and she talks about international law and gender context, and she talks about trivalent dimension of justice, which include economic, social, cultural, and political justice and injustice situations. So how far, our criminal justice system is taking into account all these issues that we need to, I think, in short. So I'll just stop here and then maybe we can take more questions.
Yeah.
So Shweta has gone. Nikita?
Thank you, ma'am, for such an insightful and enlightening session. Now we'll proceed with the question and answers.
I think Nikita, if, Professor Patel could give her remarks.
Yeah, Vibhuti ma'am, please go ahead.
Yeah, I think it is very important that you started with Manjushri Sarda case. We remember that for the first time, we protested within the Bombay High Court. This is women's movement had never done it because nobody would allow entry into it. But in spite of despite massive campaigns started by Nari Samta Manch and all over Maharashtra. In fact, Maharashtra government translated that exhibition, which was in English only originally, into Marathi, made multiple thousands of copies. Each and every panchayat was given. So in terms of consciousness raising, Manjushri Sarda case was very important because she was from a very affluent Marwari community. Massive dowry was given by this thing, but husband was also equally rich. And he could mobilize 8 topmost lawyers of Mumbai. We remember we used to go to the High Court and how we feminists were chanted when we went for the solidarity of Manjushri Sarda's friends. And when it went to Supreme Court, even the more powerful this thing was used. In fact, the lawyers who took up the brief were also out by feminists, and they openly, very unashamedly, very senior most lawyer, highly respected lawyer said that we lawyers are prostitutes. We take money from anybody who gives us. We take a brief of a person who gives us money. It was a very crude way in which it was being dealt. But I think the one thing that the whole process of this whole anti-dowry campaign or campaign against gender-based violence is all that things have changed to a certain extent, because earlier brothers and fathers would approach us when I was a full-timer of Women's Center after their sister or daughter was killed, and they wanted to show lesson to the in-laws. Now, because of this 10 years of campaign during 80s, only from the time mental torture or physical torture or starvation or not allowing her to contact, that stage only parents believe their daughter. When she says that she makes a panic call, and they believe her, she tries to, they try to get out of, get her out of the situation. But we know that even in a parent's space for a married daughter, it's not very easy to stay this thing. And also this campaign also helped in coming up with the Protection of Women from Domestic Violence Act. So this is the advantage. The whole process of this whole legal process which you have shown, and after the landmark contribution of the Justice Verma Committee, which had received more than 18,000 recommendations of the people, at a ground level, consciousness has increased. And we saw that even during the lockdown, when police or the criminal justice was totally geared to only Corona addressing challenges posed by pandemic, but civil society organizations also started taking initiative because of this. So I think these are some of the important things, but that doesn't mean that number of cases of gender-based violence have reduced. On the contrary, reporting has now improved. People go and write FIR. Earlier, it would be earlier in our times, it was said that behind every one reported case, there were 10 which were not reported, because people did not have faith in the system that police would do anything. So that kind of thing. Some of the operational best practices which they started, like Operation Help, which was started by Bombay Police, where the complaint that a dying declaration, when it was given, police was taking bribe and changing the dying declaration. Nobody was there because dying declaration by the dying woman, whether she was a victim of burn or acid attack or extreme cruelty by the in-laws, that allegation from the daughter, the victim's side, to counter that, Bombay Police said that okay, dying declaration would be taken in presence of feminists, and that nearly 10 feminist organizations had agreed. 72 hours, every new organization would be there as a witness. So I think these are some of the things that when you trust the civil society organizations and the state and non-state actors work together, then we can change the whole processes, structures, and mechanism. And on the contrary, you are right when you say that the very inadequate fund that you have for gender sensitization, that is very thing, and also the IPC, which has a colonial legacy, but more is needed to be done. So I think your very important presentation that you have made about the human rights, and also conveying that people's rights are human. Every section of society deserves human rights, and women's rights are human rights. Thank you.
Thank you, ma'am. So shall we open for Q&A? Question and answer. If anyone have any question, they can raise their hands. Or we can also take them after another session. So we have Gladstone sir here. Yeah. You can hear us, sir. You can also have your camera on.
Yes, I can hear you.
Yes.
Now we have Dr. Gladstone Xavier, who will be taking a session on the topic Peace, Conflict, and Social Work. Dr. Gladstone Xavier is a faculty and former head Social Work Department, Loyola College, Chennai. Welcome, sir, and over to you.
Thank you very much. Can you hear me?
We can hear you loud and clear. Yes.
I'm just assuming that you can hear me, but
We can hear you. Yes. You can
hear.
hear.
Okay, great.
Right.
Yes,
Please.
I can hear you. Thank you. Good afternoon to all of you, and thank you, Dr. Arjun, for this opportunity to talk to you. I'm delighted to be part of this very interesting program of IMPRI. The topic I've been given is quite a broad topic and such a huge canvas that we need to work on. And therefore, what I will be talking about is more on the practice side of conflict, peace building, and social work. Now, if you see, these are areas that are defined at the same time, but there's a lot of fluidity within these areas also. The fluidity concerns are quite interesting because the topics that we are interested in are of interest to everybody. It's not only to social workers. It's not only to peace builders. It's not only to lawyers. It's only to policymakers. Now, as long as humans have existed, as long as humans will continue to exist, there will be conflict. And so conflict is a phenomenon that exists everywhere. It's every time, and just like the movie title, all at once. So it's everywhere, anytime, and all at once. That's something that happens quite regularly. Now, when we try and put this whole concept of conflict in front of us, the conflict happens because we are humans, and it happens because of a positive stress, and it also helps us develop ourselves and moving on to various levels of understanding, and also in terms of progress, stress has been very useful to us. Now, if you look at the progress of human beings in the last 6,000-7,000 years, there are two people, Gerber and Gerber, who talk about our evolution. And there are also people like Hariri, Yuval Noah Hariri, who talk about the sapiens. The two major reasons for human survival is collaboration and adaptation. When there is a fight, you collaborate and you adapt to a situation, and then you move forward. Now, this has been happening from time immemorial, and there is enough evidence to say that how human beings as a race have survived for so many years, thousands of years. How did we survive despite the conflicts? Is because we learn to collaborate. And because we learn to collaborate, we also learn to adapt to different situations. So we are now talking a lot about climate change. We're talking a lot about issues of gender. We're talking a lot about caste, discrimination, all these things we're talking. These are not new. I would like to pick on climate change, which is not new because we know from the past history that we have come a long way since the Ice Age. The Ice Age melted and there was enough scope for things to grow. And then there were heat waves, the desert formed, the volcanoes formed, there's high pressure, etc., etc. So we are in a very interesting moment where we have accelerated this change. We have accelerated the climate change, and we're moving forward to that, which creates a lot of conflict. Now, within that framework, we also look at the 5 key areas or 5 key causes of conflict. Now, the 5 key causes of conflict have been defined very well by so many people. And one of the key causes of conflict to start with is the conflict of the ideology and the mind and the worldview. 2 ideologies coming together and you're not able to satisfy each other. And then there is this huge worldview conflict. It could be communism ideology versus capitalism. It could be Christian ideology versus Islamic ideology. It could be Hindu ideology versus something else. It could be religious. It could be various other things. And then the ideological conflict lends itself to a value-based conflict. Is there a value in conflict? What do we value more? What are the, how are we going to give certain ideas which carry value? The value-based conflict comes in. Now, as we kind of debate on this value-based conflicts and sources of conflict, we move on to the next very important area of conflict, where we are talking about conflict happens in between people. It's relational. Conflict is between individuals, groups, communities. There are human beings who are in relationships. They get into different kinds of conflict. And as we talk about that, because we are relational, it also moves on to resources. Resources could be land, it could be water, it could be wealth, it could be money, it could be so many other things. It's different types of resources. It could be knowledge. So there is a resource conflict. Who holds these resources? Who holds the power? Who has the authority to make decisions with these things? So then that takes us to a different, totally different level where we have a lot of ethical dilemmas, ethical conflicts. Should I do this? Shouldn't I do this? How can I do this? How can I attain something? How should I not attain something? There are a lot of ethical dilemmas that we are constantly confronted with. Now, from the ethical dilemmas, we would move to a few other areas. Now, we have seen these things, and now in terms of ethics, and after ethics, we also look at needs-based conflict, needs, the conflict theory of needs. There are people who cannot differentiate between needs and wants, and there are needs that need to be met. It could be physical needs, it could be emotional needs, different kinds of needs. And so within this entire framework of conflict, whether it is relational, whether it's resource-based, whether it's value-based, whether it is ideology-based, and various other things, conflicts can occur at different levels. Now, the next thing that I want to talk to you is about what are the types of conflict, different kinds of conflict, types of conflict, levels of conflict that we can go on with. Now, when we are talking about conflict, now we start with what is known as the surface conflict. A surface conflict is like a small little plant which you don't see the roots. And these are peripheral conflicts that take place, very ordinary conflicts, like you're going in a bus, somebody hits you, or somebody just scratches you, or you get caught in a traffic jam, and then you move on. So this is very surface level, does not have any relational bearings, because you're going to move on, other people are going to move on, and it really does not have any in-depth effect or affect on you. That's part one. Part two is, as we try and decipher that, when we're looking at just the surface and there are no roots in it, we go to the next level of understanding of this entire conflict, which looks at there is a root to the conflict, but there is nothing on the surface. Oftentimes in deep-rooted conflicts, where people have been affected severely due to ethnicity, or due to some kind of cultural issues, or due to issues and concerns that we face within a community where somebody is harboring hatred towards somebody else, one community versus the other. Now, this can also go back to our own partition in India. The India and Pakistan partition has left deep scars. People don't talk about it. When you look at Hindus and Muslims, it looks like they're all together and having fun and enjoying the patronage of each other. But then there are deep-rooted problems and issues over there. Now, these underlying issues take a draconian turn when you try and express yourself in various other ways. What is a draconian turn? It becomes a poison tree and it starts eating you. And when you are seriously impacted by this conflict, you either act in or act out. This acting in and acting out is something very, very important in a deep-rooted conflict where there is nothing that is on the surface, but then there's so much of hate that's under the ground. Now, the next is we are also looking at the next level of conflict, which is known as the open conflict. The open conflict is something where you know what is going on. You can see the roots, you can also see the tree, and you can see the plant also. That means that you know the source of the conflict, you also know the manifestation of the conflict. So this is really important for us to understand what type of conflict that we are dealing with. Now, as we talk about this, we branch on to, all of you love movies. All of us watch movies. We go into entertainment a lot these days. And the OTT channels are filled with so much of entertainment. And now coming from the media, now conflict itself is the source of stories for all media. If there's no conflict, there is no story. It will be so dull, drab, and boring. Now imagine you watch a TV series without a conflict. It's boring. It's just not possible to watch a TV series or a movie without a conflict. Now, according to us, what we have done is we have classified this into 9 different types of conflict. There are 9 different types of conflict, which I've just classified it for my own convenience sake from different ways. So it's very simple to classify them. The first conflict is an intrapersonal conflict. Now, what is this intrapersonal conflict? Where a person who is undergoing acute stress does not know how to decide, is not in a position to understand why somebody is feeling in a particular way. Why am I feeling hurt? Why am I feeling hungry? Why am I feeling thirsty? Why is my body reacting like this? I want to study, but I'm not able to study. I want to write, but I am blocked. I really want to achieve something, but I'm not able to achieve that. That's the kind of paradigm that we are talking about. Now here, because of that, what happens is there's a lot of intrapersonal dilemmas that we face. Whether you can be a bipolar disorder, patient with bipolar disorder, or you can have a minor psychiatric disorder, it really does not matter. But then what matters is you are experiencing that pain and suffering, and there is a bit of unsettling in your own mind. So that mental ideology, the mental state, is the first conflict that I'm talking about. It's kind of intrapersonal conflict. And the next part is an interpersonal conflict where you tend to work with another individual, where you tend to work with a person. And then sometimes it can be between a husband and a wife. It can be between colleagues. It can be between classmates, or it can be between any significant partners or friends. There is an interpersonal conflict where you know that person and that person knows you, and you have been in some kind of relationship, and then you came to a misunderstanding and then completely you broke off. So this is the second type of conflict. It's quite significant for us to understand this because in the work that we do, these interpersonal conflicts sometimes can be dubbed as psychiatric disorders. Not necessarily, but this could be just conflict, be misunderstandings, it could be just incompatible goals. The next is we are also looking at an individual versus a family. There are individuals who are in conflict, and the individual gets embroiled in a conflict with a family. So there's one person versus a few people. Now we know all, especially in the type of marriage, when young men or women want to get married to somebody from another caste, then what happens? You get into a conflict. In India, that's what happens. Or you want to choose the subject of your choice. The whole family of doctors don't want you to become a lawyer. They want you to be a doctor. So that's kind of an interpersonal a group or family versus an individual conflict that goes on. And then you have family versus family, or small social group versus another social group. That's the category number 4. Now in this, we try and see that how this works is very interesting, because we see that in a case of a small family versus another small family, when joint families were there, the conflict did not come out, did not surface. But then there are 2 brothers, and the brothers are in contention for the same property of the dad who recently passed away. So there is a family versus family. Though it is between 2 brothers, it's no longer an interpersonal thing. It's between 2 families, or between 2 families of the in-laws. the girl comes married newly, and then you move into a new family, and then that family and this family are having some conflict. And thankfully, most families appear to be smooth, but then it's important to look at this core detail of these two families coming together and then being part of one larger human community, but or there is constant fighting in between. Now, the next is a family versus a community or a society. Now, there is a family and there is a large community out there, and this community is very interested in social change, whereas the family is not. The entire village wants this family to move out of their house because they're looking at some development, but then the community says, the family says, no, they have lived here for the last 70 years and they wouldn't move. So that's one family versus a community. There could be community of a welfare association, community of groups of religious people, community of gender-based community, or could be a transgender community, it could be anything. The next is the community versus community. Now, what is this community versus community? There is one community A versus a community B, and there is conflict because you have lived differently and I have lived all my life differently. So I don't want you to come together. And even if you want to come together, this is going to be a major problem or an issue. The next type of conflict is communities versus systems. Communities versus systems. Now, communities versus systems and structures. Now, systems and structures have existed from time immemorial. But unfortunately, most of these systems and structures are oppressive systems and structures. They're not liberating. For example, patriarchy. Patriarchy is one single social evil that I can blame that exists across the world. Okay, so we're looking at that from a very non-biased point of view. From the non-biased point of view, from the peace builders point of view, we find out that this seems to be a huge problem because it's already stereotyped. And then the entire community itself is being stigmatized. And so then what happens is there is a conflict of two communities coming together and then fighting together. And then there is a system that they have to fight. Now, today, what is going on in Manipur is a systemic fight, not a fight of individuals. It's systemic. Now, they announced the reservation and immediately the fight started, but not going into details of it. I would like to proceed further. The next important type of conflict is a system versus a system. There are two systems. There is a capitalist system, there is a socialist system, and these systems don't get along very well. Now, then, because of that, there is another new conflict. Well, the same thing like the Vietnam War that happened in Vietnam. Vietnam was not involved in anything, but the Vietnam War taught us so many things. So we're looking at of these groups coming together and then collaborating, coordinating, and taking things further. The last is all these things or any of these against the environment. Now, very importantly, today we are discussing about the environment, which we would have never done 25 years ago. 25 years ago, the climate was not a thing. So we started working on climate change and various other things now. And that takes us to the end of the types of conflict. The types of conflict, you can draw a tree near you, in a paper near you, and then you can just describe for yourself, okay, what is happening at different levels, and then what are the types of conflict that I'm familiar with. I'm going to take a pause and then take some questions before I proceed, because I tend to go very fast and then I don't want people to miss out. So do you have any questions or doubts with regard to the levels of conflict, the types of conflict, and so on? Any questions?
I think your presentation was so lucid and the examples you gave were so apt because the participants are also the grassroots, they have practical experience. I think they are convinced. Yeah, they are convinced.
Good. Thank you. Mate, I can take some questions. So now, if you don't ask questions, I will ask you questions. Okay, let me ask you one question. Okay, now, can you give me an example of a conflict between human beings or any group versus the environment? Is there an example people can give?
Jamila ji, can you speak? Jamila ji, you can unmute and speak in Hindi.
Yes, yes, go ahead. There's
Yeah.
Vinita Suresh who wants to talk. Yes, Mr. Suresh, go ahead.
Dinta ji, yeah, you can speak.
Jamila ji, you are there. Please unmute and speak and share
Yes.
your experiences of struggle. Environment versus people. Hello.
Yes, go ahead. Yes, yes.
Yeah. Hello. Are you there? Jamila ji?
She's here but not responding. Dinta ji,
Okay, that,
She's trying to, she is unmuted also. हाँ हाँ बोलिए बना जमीला जी. हाँ
जी जी
आप वीडियो भी दिखा सकते हैं, नो प्रॉब्लम, वीडियो भी ऑन कर सकते. अपना परिचय दीजिए.
जी मैं मेरा नाम जमीला है, मैं मुंबई में रहती हूँ. मैं मुंबई में रहती हूँ. मुंबई के जो भी स्लम्स है उसमें मेरा काम चलता है. वुमेन एम्पावर और कोविड जैसे हालातों में हमने काम किया है और साथ ही साथ हमने हाउसिंग को लेकर बहुत बड़ा काम किया है. हाउसिंग राइट्स को लेकर मुंबई की जो स्लम्स है, बहुत सारे ऐसे स्लम्स है जहाँ पर बेसिक कम्युनिटीज भी नहीं है लेकिन लोग रह रहे हैं, अपनी जिंदगी गुजार रहे हैं. ऐसे स्लम्स में हमने 2004 से काम कर रहे हैं. जब 2004 में बड़े पैमाने पे मुंबई को संघाई बनाने के लिए सरकार ने जो 90,000 हाउसेस को बुलडोज किया था, उस टाइम पे विलासराव देशमुख जी मुख्यमंत्री रहे. उस वक्त पे उसी बुलडोजिंग में हमारा खुद का भी घर टूटा हुआ था. उसी टाइम से हम एक एक्टिविस्ट के तरह काम कर रहे हैं. उसके बाद हमने बहुत बड़ा संघर्ष खड़ा किया मेधाताई के साथ में और अन्य कार्यकर्ताओं के साथ में. घर बचाओ घर बनाओ आंदोलन को बनाकर हमने अपने महिलाओं की जिम्मेदारी से, महिलाओं के एक बड़े जत्थे के साथ में हमने अपने आंदोलन को किया और हम अपने घर भी बचाए और साथ ही साथ हमने 41 बस्तियों को मुंबई के बसा दिए. उसके बाद पूरे मुंबई के अंदर जिस तरीके से हम फ्लड देखा है 2005 में, 26 जुलाई को हमने मुंबई में देखा है. उस वक्त पे हमारे घर टूटे हुए थे और हमारे पास घर नहीं थे. उसी जमीन के अंदर जो झोपड़े लोग बना कर रहे थे, उस वक्त पे भी वो बहकर चली जाना, उनका दोबारा एक बार डेमोलेशन प्रकृति की तरफ से होना, ये भी बहुत बड़ा अन्याय लोगों के साथ हुआ. वहां से जो हमारा संघर्ष शुरू हुआ, एक कार्यकर्ता के होने के नाते और एक महिला और एक गृहिणी होने के नाते हमने जो दुख झेले हैं उस पीरियड के अंदर, वो बहुत ही हमें झकझोर कर रख दिया. उस वक्त पे हमने ये तय किया कि नहीं, अब जो भी मुसीबतें होगी मुंबई के अंदर स्लम्स में, तो हम साथ में मिलकर एक साथ में आगे बढ़ेंगे और उन मुसीबतों का सामना करेंगे और उनको हासिल करेंगे. और उसी प्रण के साथ में हमने काफी कुछ हासिल किया. हमने राशन के अंदर का भ्रष्टाचार को रोका और लोगों को 20 रुपए के अंदर हमने राशन कार्ड दिलाए. उसके बाद हमने वाटर का भ्रष्टाचार रोका, लाइट का भ्रष्टाचार रोका. हमने लोगों को लीगली कनेक्शंस दिलवाए. पानी हक समिति को तैयार किया, उसकी मैं फाउंडर मेंबर हूँ. हमने कोर्ट में गए, पानी हक समिति की तरफ से 95 के पहले के लोगों को ही पानी पीने का अधिकार था, लेकिन हमने 95 के बाद भी लोग जिंदे हैं. और हम ये एक मूलभूत सुविधा है पानी. पानी तो बरसता है आसमान से, उसके लिए तो कोई पैसे भगवान भी नहीं लेता है, ना प्रकृति लेती है. तो सरकार इस तरीके से कट ऑफ डेट लगाकर पानी को रोकना, ये इंसाफ नहीं है. इसके लिए हम कोर्ट गए, वहां से जीत कर आए. 2015 में वो जीआर लेकर आए. वो कोर्ट के ऑर्डर से हमने आज हर घर को पानी देने के लिए तैयार सक्षम हो चुके हैं. उसी तरीके से हम लाइट के प्रश्न हैं, जैसे बिजली के प्रश्न है, उनको भी हमने सॉल्व करके लिया है. और साथ ही साथ कोविड जैसे हालातों में हमने हेल्थ को लेकर बड़ा काम किया है और लोगों की समस्याओं को दूर करने के लिए उन हालातों में भी अपने आप को बाहर निकाल कर एक कमेटी, जैसे बिलाल भाई है, लारा जेसानी जी है और अनिल भाई हैं, ऐसे कार्यकर्ताओं को जोड़कर, साथ ही साथ ग्राउंड लेवल के अखिलेश भाई, जमील भाई, ऐसे लोगों को जोड़कर हमने काफी बड़ा काम हेल्थ का भी किया है. इसी बीच में हमने एनवायरनमेंट की एक बड़ी इश्यू जो है, जो हर जगह पे फ्लड आ रहे हैं, घर गिर जा रहे हैं, लोग मर जा रहे हैं, कहीं पे पानी भर गया है, कहीं पे सीवरेज का लाइन ब्लॉकेज है। इन सारे चीजों के ऊपर लगातार हम कई सालों से अपना एनर्जी लगा रहे हैं, अपना दिमाग चलाकर, सरकार की मदद लेकर, सरकार के साथ में खड़ा रहकर, कभी सरकार के विरोध में भी खड़ा रहकर हम अपने काम कर रहे हैं और अपने बस्तियों को जिंदा रखे हुए हैं। ये तो सिर्फ मुंबई का काम नहीं है, हम पूरे देश में अलग अलग जगह पर इस तरीके के इश्यूज को लेते हैं। डोमेस्टिक वायलेंस के बहुत सारे केसेस में पूरे देश में जाकर सॉल्व करती हूँ। साथ ही साथ जो भी इश्यूज होते हैं बड़े लेबर के, अभी हमने लेबर यूनियन ओपन किया है, उसके तहत हमने लेबरों की जो समस्याएं हैं उनको लेकर वक्त के अनुसार, वक्त को समझते हुए, वक्त के हिसाब से जो समस्याएं हमारे सामने खड़ी हो रही है, उन समस्याओं को हम लोग हाथ में लेकर उसके पीछे मेहनत करके उसको कहीं ना कहीं सॉल्व करने की पूरी कोशिश कर रहे हैं। और इस कोशिश के अंदर जैसे विभूति मैडम जी हैं और अन्य बहुत सारे ऐसे लोग हैं जो हमारे पीछे खड़ा रहकर हमें मोटिवेट करते हैं और आगे बढ़ाते हैं और हमें एनर्जी देते रहते हैं। और रही बात, मैं लगातार इन सेशनों में जुड़ी हुई, कानून अलग है और कानून का इम्प्लीमेशन बहुत अलग है। हम कानून पढ़ रहे हैं और कानून को समझ रहे हैं, लेकिन वो हम जब ग्राउंड लेवल में जाते हैं और ग्राउंड लेवल की पुलिस स्टेशन में जाते हैं या कोई इश्यू लेकर हम कोर्ट भी पहुंचते हैं, तो जो कानून में लिखा होता है उतना हासिल करना काफी लंबा समय लग जाता है, उसके लिए बड़ा संघर्ष भी लग जाता है। वहां पे कहीं ना कहीं हमें महसूस होता है कि जो लिखा होता है और वो जितना मोटिवेशनल होता है वो जमीनी स्तर पे उतनी जल्दी तरक्की और उस तरीके से हासिल करना मुश्किल सा महसूस होता है हमें कभी कभी। और ये सच भी है क्योंकि हम देख ही रहे हैं कई सालों से कि हम कानून के तहत जाकर, कानून के अंदर रहकर या कानून को पाने की कोशिश करते हैं तो बहुत सारे मुसीबतों का सामना भी करना पड़ रहा है। आज की अगर हालात देखें तो बस हम क्या बोले और क्या ना बोले, ऐसी परिस्थितियों में जिंदगी चल रही है। तो फिर भी हम अपना संघर्ष नहीं छोड़े हैं। हम अपने संघर्ष को लेकर, हमारी समस्याओं को लेकर कानून की मदद लेते हुए आप जैसे समझदार बुद्धिमान लोगों के जो सजेशंस होते हैं, आपके जो लिखे हुए किताबें होते हैं, आपने बताए हुए रास्ते होते हैं, उन रास्तों में चलते हुए हम अपनी जो भी संघर्ष है उसको कामयाब करने में जरूर कामयाब है।
थैंक यू जमीला जी, बहुत ही इंस्पायरिंग रहा। And thank you very much. Even on the day of Eid, I know how warm and hospitable you are during Eid, and you have joined it. That shows your commitment. I'm really touched by your work ethics. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Would you like me to translate that in English?
Yeah.
No, I'm okay. I'm okay with that. I did understand.
Participants.
For the participants' sake, you can summarize.
Chat box. Yeah, or your summarize or chat box, whatever. Ask the part.
Okay. Yeah. Dintaji, you are not been able to unmute. You can type in your question.
No, it was not a question. I was answering. He asked a question, no? So I was giving I don't know whether the example was correct. I was talking about the constant environmental conflict we have in Kerala, which has gained a lot of media attention with an elephant called Arikomban, and how there is been a lot of conversation about we are encroaching into the forest, but there is a conflict even now. It is going on whether when the elephant was shifted to another place, but he came back. So I think the problem is not solved, but still it is a conflict which is going on here.
Yeah. So these are very important areas. So may I just share a slide, if that's okay? I'm just going to share a slide that may give you a little more, just some kind of a Raja understanding of what this is. I hope you can see the slide.
We can see it. You can go.
It is in a working mode. Yeah, now it's fine. Nice.
Can you see this?
Yeah.
Okay. Now, you see, when you're talking about all these conflicts, I just spoke about this is what I just spoke about. And if you look at these conflicts, when you move on from these conflicts, you also try and understand, this is what I said, we talk about a surface conflict, a latent conflict, and an open conflict. You talk about this. So then conflict itself is an idea where there are two people who are having incompatible goals. There are no goals. These goals are not matching. There are two different goals, two different people coming together, and without the goals, you are having a lot of struggle in that. Now, over there's also behavior-wise, there's some behaviors that you are compatible with people, and some behaviors are not incompatible because you think differently, you do things differently. So that's important. Then that takes us to basic terminology. There are so many different terminologies today, no? We're talking about what are these terminologies? These terminologies start with conflict prevention. Now, what can you prevent? You can prevent a surface conflict. You can prevent an open conflict. You can prevent a conflict that's yet to start, or the conflict that's already there. You can, but then you don't see a latent conflict and you can't prevent much. And then you are looking at conflicts the conflict settlements. Now, conflict settlement is something that you can have only when the conflict arises. And the conflict arises, then you can work on it. And there's conflict management, which can be done only when there is a whole area of people who you talk to people and change things, and then you move people around and then you work with that. Then you have conflict resolution. A resolution can be achieved only when people come and talk about conflict. And then finally you have conflict transformation, where you start with a latent conflict, you work with the surface conflict, then you also work with the open conflict. Now that's something that is quite interesting. But then conflicts are always escalating. Conflicts don't stay where they are. So this is kind of looking at this whole Danish center of conciliation, put this together. Now there is a disagreement, and then we talk about blaming each other. Then the problem expands because you're always keeping count of the mistakes the other person did. And then you say that, okay, I've spoken to him so many times, there's no real need to look at that. And then you move into enemy images. Then they say, okay, those people are simply bad. They're bad people. Like today, what's happening in Manipur is exactly this. It's the cookies who are branding the Meiteis and saying these are bad people. They are wanting reservation and they want to take our things away. So, and these are enemy images. And then the open hostility, and you start fighting, and the cookies on one way, and you go to the other way. The cookies and the Meiteis are fighting, and you get into an extreme polarization. Now, what is happening over here is because if you could have fixed it right in the beginning, this wouldn't have happened. And some things cannot be fixed right in the beginning. You need to let them mature in terms of issues and conflicts, and then you try to work with that. And then this is what I was talking to you about earlier. What are the causes or the sources of conflict? We're talking about relationships, data, interest, structures, and values. Now, we are talking about all these things today after a larger understanding of conflicts in the world for the last, about 70, 80 years. Before that, issues were different, and future is also going to be different. Now, this conflict wheel talks to you more about what exactly is happening and where things are happening. And that takes us to the next important area of looking at, it starts with a disagreement. Any conflict starts with a disagreement. Now, from that, you don't talk to the person, you talk about the person. And then your reaction is, in the previous session, people were talking about the law, the legal point of an eye for an eye. And that's the Hammurabi's law of court. You don't talk about that. Then you're looking at the total antagonism and hostility. And finally, we are looking at change in how societies are organized. Today, we see the communities, especially the Muslim communities, how there's so much of polarization against them. I mean, somebody takes tomorrow is Bakrid, Eid is coming, and then you see the isolationist trends that are moving. So what is happening is, from a very constructive dialogical format, we are moving to a very hostile and destructive modes of conflict. And that takes us to the next, where we are talking about a total social transformation of conflict. Because of this conflict, we are looking at the curve of conflict, where from the time we are able to prevent conflict, it is totally preventable. When it was just a one-on-one issue, it was totally preventable. Now, this one-on-one does not exist anymore. So you have to take a diplomatic angle. You have to take an angle of actively involving in peacemaking, or you have to look at the post-conflict reconciliation. So this is kind of, you can work with conflict right at the prevention stage. You can work at it at the crisis management stage, or if everything fails, you wait till the peace building stage. So this is also another important area of intervention. Now here, when we're talking about the ecological system, from social work and conflict to social work. Now, Bronfenbrenner's model is looking at these systems. As human beings, we are all born into a system. We are born into a family. We are born into this world, which can be very hostile, can be very dangerous, could be very deadly, but at the same time, could be very friendly as well. So when a child is born, the child need not be the center of the whole universe or the family that you're around. A child is born into a context. And this context is what we call as a personal context, a child's context. And then the child moves up the ladder into a microsystem, which is the family and its environment. Then you also move into schools and then moves into other influencing environments. Then you move into a macro system of social cultural values, and then a chrono system that keeps changing over a period of time. Now, this is what it looks like. Now, you put some words to it, and this is how it looks like. Now, this is a very interesting adaptation of Bronfenbrenner's ecological systems model. That is one person in the middle, and then look at the outer circle, which is talking about the microsystem. It talks about features, spirituality, community, peers, people who you play games with, and stuff like that. Now, the exosystem becomes very important here because a conflict can take place in an exosystem where there are neighbors. And today you have the major part of the exosystem being carried away by the social media. Whatever the media says is sometimes appears to be so true, but it's not. And today we have AI. Now, the AI is able to exploit your mind, is able to tell you what you're thinking, is able to tell you what to do, and things like that. And then we are also looking at health systems, workplaces, extended families, and places of law, and the justice system. And later we are going into a macro system. A macro system is where the law exists, where the culture exists, where written and unwritten rules are there in this macro system. Some rules are there, written rules are there, but then do we follow them? For example, when it comes to a matter of caste, how many of us will say, I want to challenge it and then I want to move on? You can't, because you are within a macro system. Then your mother will blackmail you, your father will blackmail you. Then if that's not possible, they will threaten you. If the threat is not working and you still go ahead, then you can get killed. And then the last part is the chrono system. The chrono system is a system where it is constantly changing. The context is altering itself. It is a chronograph. It's like a clock. It's moving and changing for various reasons. Now here, what can you do as social worker? These are a few tools that I put together, but I'm not going to go through all these tools because as social workers, first idea is to be critical and analyze the conflict. Okay. Now, in terms of analyzing a conflict, the first tool that we look at is the historical tool. The historical tool is known as the timeline. And what is a historical tool? What is the timeline? The timeline is about bringing people together, gathering the narratives of both the parties. You gather the narratives of both the parties. Now, this is an example of a timeline. Now, there are people of Teso in Uganda and the Ugandan government. 86 to 92. What happened to you and what happened to you? What did you do? What did they do? Do not blame each other. There's no need to blame each other. You can just proceed with that without blaming each other. Now, this is just a conflict timeline, just to understand what is. Why do we bring people together? We bring people together because we want them to work together, understand together, and move forward together. Now, next is the tree. The conflict tree talks about a root causes analysis. Today in the development sector, we are talking a lot about root cause analysis. What is this root cause analysis? Or what is this? Why are you not doing a branch analysis? Branch analysis is important, but at the same time, root cause analysis is even more important. So let's move towards a root cause analysis, find out the root causes, and then try and find out what is sustaining a conflict. That's what are the core issues. What is keeping it going? And then when you see a tree, you only see the leaves, the branches, and the fruits. That's what we call as the manifestation. Now, this is all mango season. So wherever trees you go around, you see these mango trees, lovely mango trees. Now, by looking at the mango or by tasting the mango, we can also look at the quality of the tree. But then our idea of looking at the world from this perspective of conflict is quite different, because we are trying to solve a different issue in a particular context. So this is an example from Kenya. In Kenya, what you see is raiding, looting, unfair representation, hatred, suppression, and killing. But what is deep inside is corruption. Looking at three kind of, leaders who are not equipped to handle situations. There's such a lot of issues that are going on over there: colonial boundaries, unequal development, law, and various other things. And then the core issue is people don't have land. Can you address that? That's another very important area. The next is the conflict mapping. In social work, we have these chapati diagrams. We have chapati diagrams. We do a lot of mapping. Now here, it's just with a small piece of paper, try and map out whose role is what. Now, actor A and actor B are the key people who are important in this conflict. Now, in this conflict, as they are important, we also move ahead with other things and say that what is happening to the others? Should we leave them out or should we include them? Now, they mostly say that they need to be included. Now, in that inclusion, what is the relationship between these actors? Are they supporters or are they, people who will create more trouble and they want to try and derail the entire process? And that's one tool. And this is the live tool of what the conflict is in Myanmar. This is just an example. I'm not going to skip this tool and move on to the next most important tool. My favorite is when you are a social worker, when you want to work with people, you see only a very, very small fraction of the problem. So why hasn't a student turned up to school? It's a fraction of the problem. So I sent 2 people to the school to check out why he did not come to school. And then I find out that the teachers beat him up. Why did they beat him? And then I asked for this question of why he was beaten. And then the teachers say, his character is bad. Hey, come on, the child is in 10th standard. How can a 10th standard have bad character? In a deep interior village. So then I find out from this boy, and the boy tells me that, no, sir, I don't want to go to school because the teachers are beating me every day. Why? Because I am friendly with a girl from the same class who sits in that bench. Well, that's okay. It's a healthy relationship, no? At the 10th standard, you know what to do. No, sir, they found me talking with this girl. And so this boy was thrashed. They thrashed him. And from the next day, the boy did not come to school. Now, deep down within that, that's only an incident. But deep down is the whole insecurity of caste. You're so insecure that you may think that this boy and that girl will be married. It's kind of okay. It's okay to see that between castes they can get married. But it's only in 10th standard. In 10th standard, you don't do that. The teachers locked up this child and gave him a sound beating. And he refused to go to school. Now, the original idea behind this is this child should not access higher education because the child comes from a low caste community, a vulnerable community. The dominant teachers have done this. So I was surprised. But then they went into this analysis. What you see is the behavior. What you see is the behavior. You do not see the attitude of a person. You only see the behavior of the person. Now, what is this behavior? Now, this behavior is violent, it's negative, and does not promote peace. How do you change it? Now, this is also because of an attitude that's filled with hate, an attitude with mistrust, attitude of fear, attitude of sexism, racism, intolerance, and casteism. And then there are structural and institutional violence issues where whole society is organized in a particular way that you cannot break free of this violence. So to change the direct action, you must change the attitude and the context. And so we see that some of the parents now who see these children getting into trouble, put them in the hostel, take them away, remove them from that place. A temporary displacement will happen. Now, in terms of social work, we need to fix this. In order to bring about a behavior change, it's important to bring about an attitudinal change. And that attitudinal change has to be tied up with the value system that we have. The next important tool that we have is looking at in terms of social work. We look at when we start a conversation, we always start with a position to say that what we want. Okay, in a negotiation, that's what we say. But then we do have a lot of interests. And interests are what we say we want. We're not saying the want. We're saying what we want. So then the third is the key over here. Third is like super important. But what is the need of the person? What does the person need? Does the person need an ice cream or does the person need water to drink? On a hot day, ice cream will be amazing, yes. But can we survive on this amazing ice cream? No. How amazing the ice cream is, it's not kind of, it's not food. It's dessert. It is part of the food, but it is not the main course. So this is how we try and work. So look at the need. Now that takes me to the end of this lecture where what are we trying to do as social workers? As social workers, how do you identify the need? How do you work with the community? How do you interact with the community? How do you take this further? Now that is a totally different ballgame. Now that's when intervention comes in. Now in the intervention side, we work with small groups, communities, and individuals because we want to know their entire story. And one story can go for about 3-4 hours. That's not our, we don't want to see a television series when we're listening to a story of a person. That's not the agenda. The agenda is to get details on what is affecting this person and what kind of help that we can give. So individually, we take care. The next is working with small groups. Working with small groups becomes a very important area because working with small groups also exposes people to a newer environment. And groups will come here and then start talking about issues, discussing about issues, and then breaking free of the cycles of violence. And next is when we are trying to do this, when we are trying to do these interventions, we also talk to groups of people. Groups of people, working with groups is very important because you need to have a shared value system. And that's when you assist each other and then move forward with that. And finally, working with communities. It could be residents' welfare associations. It could be issues and concerns that need to be raised over there. It could be a swimming association. It could be various other associations. Now, these associations are groups of people, communities of people who can make substantive change in the way we think and deal with things. Now, this is kind of in a nutshell. We have more tools. I can go on and on and on. I'm going to take a pause to take a few questions before we go into the concluding phase.
Thank you. Thank you so much, sir. So if participants have any questions, they can raise their hands. Professor Patel, would you like to chip in and give your remarks? Ma'am, please unmute yourself.
Presentation was Dr. Gladstone was extremely lucid, and also the way he classified and gave examples, they were very important. In terms of question, I would just say that contribution of social worker in creating evidences of policy formulations or policy reforms or judicious implementations of policies and laws, and also in terms of evaluation of some of the micro, meso, or macro policies. What have been the best practices, number one? And number two is that the universal thumb rule should we have, because there are differences, there are multicultural lifestyles, there are pluralism, but what can be the thumb rule for morality of morality of coexistence, no? So can you just talk about that?
Sure. So I have a lot of evidences on this, how we have worked in terms of advocacy. And the idea is, first, you understand the situation and unpack the actors and unpack the issues. That's number one. Number two is the community ready for this type of policy change? Is the community ready? Because policy change, it can come like a tsunami and carry all of us. Sometimes policy change never happens because the community is not ready for this. There are some really interesting laws, but is the community ready to take that forward? Are they willing to adapt to that situation? Which we see the answer is no. So the levels of advocacy are three levels. The first level of advocacy is within the community, you have to advocate for change. It's kind of intra-community for change, advocacy for change within the community. The next is advocacy for change within a group of concerned citizens or influencers who are totally convinced about it, who can again link to the ground reality. The third level of advocacy is the advocacy with the policymakers, who will be able to affect this, bring about these things, and then bring it to action. So these are basics. Now, for this, there's a lot of groundwork that needs to be done. Unfortunately, it is not easy. Just like it takes so much of time to build a community and then turn it violent. I mean, we can already have the example of RSS, started 100 years ago, and it took them some time to make it so violent. Now, it took them a good 25, 30 years to look at the violence perspective. Or you can take Al-Qaeda, or you can take any of these movements, which have turned the people's ideology by working. It is more of community, inter-community, intra-community advocacy that has been done. Now, I work with refugees, so I can give you a lot of examples from my experience of refugees. Now, the next question is, in terms of social work, in terms of evidence, in terms of practical reality, how can you really bring about this change, I think? No, was that the next question, or am I missing the point? I'm not able to hear you, ma'am, I think.
Yeah, I said that's what I said. That how can we bring about?
All right, okay.
Yeah.
Yeah, so bringing about a change is very important in terms of social work, in terms of areas that we are trying to work on. Now, it starts with the attitude, which will give you a good latitude. Find out the latitude in which we work in. And that's when we try to identify alliances and similar civil society organizations. I work with the PUC and the People's Union for Civil Liberties that are pretty close to us. I work with a number of advocacy groups. Now, try and equip ourselves with the language, the kind of language they speak, the same language they speak, the kind of jargons they use, and things like that. Now, how I see it is bringing about a transformation is not really just community-based. It cannot be just, transformation cannot happen only at the community level. It needs to happen with a multi-sectoral involvement. Like today, I'm going to meet the Commissioner of Rehabilitation for Refugees. I'm going to ask them a few key questions. Now, why is the Tamil Nadu government keeping refugees as they are? And this is backed by evidential proof that I have with me based on a study that I did and saying, look, this is the cost. This is how much it costs to keep the refugees going. So what do you think about it? Who's going to pay? Are the taxpayers going to pay for this? Now, asking them more critical questions. That's the way that we advocate. And lastly, what we also do is advocacy is never a one-time thing. No? Sometimes it takes us 10 years to put a single child back in school. It takes 10 years. 10 years by the time the child has left the school already. Or it's not for this generation. Advocacy is not done only for this generation, but the generations to come. So in terms of policy work, our experience has been being consistent and being visible at the same time, bringing it to their side in different forms, shapes, and sizes. So that's kind of helps us to take this process forward. And I can give you more examples from our conflict work in Sri Lanka or in Afghanistan or in India or wherever you could do that. So I think I've taken too much of your time, and it's time to conclude by saying thank you to all these wonderful people and all the 23 people who are part and parcel of this training program, and hope this was useful to you in some way or the other. And I can come back to you with more examples, more tools, and more practical information. Thank you very much.
Thank you, sir, for your wonderful session today. I have one last question to you. That you have worked in across a lot of continents or different countries. How do you see social work, conflict, peace resolution, this thing happening in India vis-a-vis other countries? What are the different things? Because India is also the land of Gandhi. We visited Sabarmati Ashram together. How do you see things different in India? Because India is also very diverse, almost a subcontinent in itself. So how do you see?
See, the diversity is the strength. Diversity is the strength of India. So we have different models and techniques of peace building, and it's very relevant. And Gandhi is only one of those iconic figures. But then there are so many others, these unspoken, untold community heroes in every single community. And those people don't know Gandhi. They don't know this entire freedom struggle. For them, everyday struggle is important. Go to a tribal basti or a Dalit basti that we work in very regularly, then the relevance of Gandhi is something very different, whereas their relevance of Ambedkar is more true and more real for them. And there are some people who don't know Ambedkar, but still involved in this entire peace process. So now what is happening is, in different countries, it's a different model. Last week, I was in Sri Lanka, trying to talk about this at length. I was running classes on strategic planning and analyzing conflicts. The week before that, I was in Bali, having a conversation in Indonesia with some senior Gandhian leaders in a Gandhi ashram, where they're talking about Hinduism in a completely different form. It's very syncretic. Hinduism in Indonesia and Bali especially is syncretic. They're saying it's a mix of 4 religions: the Buddhism and Hinduism, with a lot of Christianity, and then Islam, all put together as Hinduism. It's very syncretic. Or their peace comes quite naturally to people. Now, the same thing is not true of a very Buddhist country in Sri Lanka. It's totally different. But here in India, we talk about in Tamil Nadu is very different from what you people talk about in the north. Issues are so different. Now, the Manipur conflict itself, peace building in Manipur is not as complicated as we think. Now, the Meiteis and the Kukis and the various other, the Nagas are the key players. The mountains are the gods and goddesses. The Meitei people are saying, give us access to the land of our own gods. Whereas the Kukis are saying, no, that's our land. These are the mountains and they are the plain people. You have to stick to that land. And the Nagas are claiming for the Raja Naga land called Nagalim. Now the conflict has escalated with the short-sighted vision of giving them a reservation which takes away the land rights of the cookie. And 60%, 54% of these people can move into that area. So it's kind of culturally very different. So that's why we say you have, if you want to do conflict resolution, if you want to do social work, you have to keep your ears on the ground so that you listen to the heartbeat of the people as they walk. So that's how we try and look at it wherever we are. It's important to look at that grassroots intervention, and that makes it more clear. And in India, it is more complicated because of the diversity, but diversity is also a huge area of strength. That's how I see it. I hope I'm answering your question, Dr. Arjun.
Sure. Thank you. And I'll work with you and try to have a deliberation on the Manipur issue. And so you are summarizing it so well. I'll try to have some more panel from Manipur and deliberate on this. And thank you. Thank you so much.
Sure. Thank you. And hope this was enjoyable. And Nandri Vanakkam.
Sure. Yes.
Thank you, sir, for an enlightening and thought-provoking session. Now I request Professor Vibhuti Patel to give her closing remarks for the session.
Please unmute.
Yeah. In today's session, we began with a discussion on some of the very important landmark cases that Indian history we had experienced. And we also talked about the various approaches to the justice, whether it's instrumental, utilitarian, retributive, and restorative justice, about which Dr. Shalu Nigam gave us so many important examples. And the second presentation, which also very systematically classified 9 types of conflicts and gave so many examples were given by Dr. Gladstone. And what we learned is that we need to have, to solve these problems, we need to know the culture, we have to keep our ear to the ground, we have to have a bottom-up approach, we should have a dialogue with the community, and then only we will be able to have peacemaking, peace building, and peacekeeping in today's conflicted world. I think it's a very important message that we have got, and we also got various modalities of and the processes that we need to follow as conscious citizens, as social activists, as institution builders, and as a representatives of the state structures and systems. Thank you very much.
Thank you, ma'am. Sir, please unmute yourself.
Thank you so much for that. Thank you so much, Dr. Vibhuti Patel, for that amazing summary. Thank you. And have a very, very nice session that follows. Thank you. Bye-bye.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you, ma'am. Thank you, sir. With the chair's permission, we can now go for the vote of thanks. As we've come to the end of day 8 of Law and Public Policy Youth Fellowship, an online national summer school program, a 2-month online immersive legal awareness and action research certificate training course, and internship program, I, Nikita Bhardwaj, researcher at IMPRI, Impact and Policy Research Institute, would like to propose the formal vote of thanks on behalf of IMPRI, New Delhi. We are grateful to our expert for the day 8 session, Advocate Dr. Shalu Nigam and Dr. Gladstone Xavier, for taking out their valuable time and giving us an opportunity to learn from this online certificate program. We thank our chair, Professor Vibhuti Patel, and lead advisor, Advocate Dr. Shalu Nigam, for convening the session. We thank all of our participants who have raised pertinent questions and actively participated in today's deliberation. We look forward to welcoming you this Friday, that is 30th June at 11:30 a.m. for our 9th day of the certification course by distinguished experts, Professor Aruna Roy and Advocate Dr. Albertina Almeida. We are grateful if you are watching us later on YouTube or listening to us on our various podcasts or reading our publications. We hope you continue to join us in future to our IMPRI #WebPolicyTalk and #WebPolicyLearning. Wishing you a good day. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you, everyone.
Thank you.